The day we got kicked out, it wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no shattered dishes, no neighbors peeking through their curtains. Just one quiet sentence. You're old enough now. I was 17. My younger sister, Lily, had turned 15 a few months earlier. And apparently that was enough for our stepfather to decide we were no longer his problem. It happened on a Tuesday evening. The sun was just beginning to drop behind the trees when he dropped a black trash bag onto the porch. Inside were my clothes. Lily stood beside me holding her backpack so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Where are we supposed to go?" she asked. He shrugged. "Figure it out." Then he stepped inside the house and shut the door. The lock clicked. That sound stuck with me, because it meant something simple. We weren't coming back. For a while we just stood there. Cars drove past on the road. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Life kept moving like nothing had happened. Lily finally exhaled slowly. "Well, this is new." I checked my pockets. $9. She dug through her backpack. $12 total, I said. She raised an eyebrow. "So, we're basically rich." Obviously. We started walking. Our town wasn't very big. One gas station. One diner. A small grocery store. Everyone knew everyone. Which meant by the time Lily and I reached the main street, people were already looking. Not judging. Just curious. Mrs. Carter from the grocery store gave us 2 sandwiches that were about to expire. The gas station clerk let us refill our water bottles. But nobody offered a place to stay. Not because they were cruel. Just because helping 2 homeless teenagers was complicated. And complicated things make people nervous. That night we slept behind the diner. There was a narrow strip of gravel between the building and the dumpster that blocked most of the wind. Lily wrapped her hoodie around her knees. "You think this is temporary?" she asked. "Probably." "How temporary?" I stared up at the dark sky. "I guess we'll find out." The next morning we left town. Not because we wanted to, but because staying meant running into our stepfather, or someone calling him. About 2 miles outside town the road turned into gravel. The houses disappeared. Fields stretched out across the valley. Tall pine trees lined the hills beyond. Lily kicked a rock down the road. "You're thinking something stupid again." "Maybe." She sighed. "That's how all our adventures start." About another mile down the road we saw it. At first it looked like nothing more than a pile of logs among the trees. But as we got closer, the shape became clear. A cabin. Old. Small. And completely rusted with age. The roof sagged in the middle. The wooden walls had turned gray from years of weather. One of the windows was broken. The front porch leaned slightly to one side. Lily stopped walking. "You're not thinking about going in there." "I am. That thing looks like it's about to collapse." "Maybe. But it also looks empty." She folded her arms. "Which usually means it belongs to someone." We approached carefully. Tall weeds brushed against our legs as we walked through the clearing. The door hung slightly open. A breeze pushed it back and forth with a quiet creak. I stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned, but held. Lily stayed a few steps behind me. "If a raccoon jumps out at us," she said, "I'm blaming you." "Fair." The cabin door opened slowly. Inside, it was dusty, but not destroyed. Sunlight streamed through the broken window and lit up the room. There was a stone fireplace along one wall, a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a small kitchen counter near the back. Lily stepped inside cautiously. "Okay, this is weird." "What?" "It's actually kind of nice." She spun slowly in the middle of the room. "Old but nice." I nodded. For the first time since we got kicked out, I felt something close to relief. Because the cabin had something we desperately needed. Walls. A roof. And most importantly, shelter. We spent the afternoon cleaning. Dust flew everywhere. We swept the floor using tree branches. Boarded the broken window with an old plank we found outside. Even fixed the front door so it would close properly. By sunset the cabin looked completely different. Still old. Still broken in places. But livable. Lily sat on the porch step and stretched her arms. "Well," she said, "we officially have a house." I laughed. "Technically." She grinned. "Best $12 investment ever." That's when we heard the truck. An old pickup rattled down the gravel road and stopped near the clearing. Lily froze. "A company." A tall man stepped out. Gray beard. Worn boots. Work gloves. He walked toward the cabin slowly. "You two planning to steal something?" I raised my hands. "No, sir." He looked at Lily. Then back at me. "You living here?" She answered first. "Maybe." The man stared at the cabin for a moment. Then chuckled. "Well, I'll be damned." His name was Walter. and he owned most of the land around the valley, including the cabin. Apparently, he had bought the property years earlier when the previous owner moved away, but the cabin was too old to bother fixing. Walter pointed at the building. "You kids want it." I blinked. "What? The cabin?" Lily stepped forward. "How much?" Walter scratched his beard, then shrugged. $3. Lily and I looked at each other. $3. That was less than a sandwich. I pulled 3 crumpled bills from my pocket and handed them over. Walter took the money and smiled. "Well," he said, "guess you two just became cabin owners." That evening, Lily and I sat on the porch watching the sunset stretch across the valley. The wind moved softly through the trees. Birds drifted across the sky above the hills. Lily leaned back on her hands. "You realize something?" "What?" "We bought a log cabin. For $3. She smiled. "Best deal ever." I smiled too. But as the sun disappeared behind the trees, I kept looking at the cabin. Because something about the place didn't feel ordinary. And we hadn't even discovered the most important thing about it yet. For the first few days, the cabin was just a shelter. And honestly, that alone felt incredible. After sleeping behind dumpsters and on cold gravel, having 4 wooden walls and a roof over our heads felt like winning the lottery. Lily and I worked nonstop. The place hadn't been lived in for years, maybe decades. Dust coated everything, and the air inside smelled like old wood and pine needles. But the structure itself was surprisingly solid. The logs were thick and tightly stacked. The stone fireplace still looked sturdy. Even the wooden beams across the ceiling were straight. Lily stood in the center of the room one morning with a broom made from pine branches. "You know what's weird?" she said. "What?" "This place doesn't feel abandoned." I looked around. The furniture was old but intact. The cabinets weren't broken. The fireplace looked like someone had used it at some point not too long ago. "Yeah," I said slowly. "It feels like someone just left." We spent most of the week repairing what we could. The broken window was our first project. Walter had left a pile of scrap wood near the road after selling us the cabin, and we used a few planks to board it up properly. Lily hammered nails while I held the boards in place. "Look at us," she said proudly. "Professional construction crew." Obviously. By the end of the afternoon, the cabin looked a little less like a forgotten ruin and a little more like a home. Not perfect, but ours. Walter visited occasionally. Usually he showed up in his rattling pickup truck carrying something useful. One day it was a box of canned food. Another day it was a bundle of firewood. "You two settling in all right?" he asked during one visit. "Yeah," Lily said. He nodded and looked around the cabin. "You planning to stay long?" I shrugged. "Until we figure out something better." Walter looked at the surrounding forest, then back at the cabin. "You might already have something better." At the time, I didn't really understand what he meant. But I would soon. The real discovery happened about 2 weeks later. Lily found it. It was early morning, and we were cleaning out the back room of the cabin. The room had probably been a storage area at some point. Old crates, broken shelves, a stack of firewood in the corner. Lily was dragging one of the crates across the floor when it suddenly stopped. "Hey," she said. "What?" "This thing's stuck." I walked over and helped push. The crate moved easily once we lifted it. But when we set it down, Lily frowned at the floor. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "That hollow sound." She knocked on the wooden floorboards. Thunk. The sound was different from the rest of the cabin. I crouched down and tapped the boards myself. She was right. It sounded hollow. "Move the rest of the crates," I said. 10 minutes later, the entire section of floor was clear. Right in the center was a square wooden panel about 3 feet wide. The edges were almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Lily's eyes lit up. "Secret door." "Maybe. You're telling me you bought a cabin with a secret door for $3? "Apparently." She grinned. "This just keeps getting better." The panel lifted with a long creak. Underneath, it was a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Cool air drifted up from below. Lily shined the flashlight down the steps. "What do you think's down there?" she asked. "Only one way to find out." She laughed nervously. "You're going first." The staircase led into a small underground room. The walls were stone, reinforced with thick wooden beams. And the space was much bigger than we expected. At least 20 feet long. Shelves lined the walls. And every shelf was filled. Lily stepped down behind me and froze. "Oh my, what is all this?" I walked slowly around the room. Food. Canned vegetables. Beans. Rice. Boxes of medical supplies. Flashlights. Batteries. Even several large water containers stacked neatly in the corner. It looked like a survival bunker. In the center of the room stood a wooden table, and sitting on top of it was a leather notebook. Lily picked it up carefully. Dust puffed into the air. "Moment of truth," she said. She opened the first page. The handwriting was neat, but faded with age. At the top was a name, Samuel Whitaker. Below that was a sentence. "If you found this cabin, you probably needed it." Lily looked up at me. "Well, that's accurate." We spent the next hour reading the notebook. Samuel Whitaker had built the cabin nearly 40 years earlier. He was a farmer who lived in the valley his entire life. Over the years, he had seen storms wipe out roads. Floods trap travelers. Winters leave people stranded in the mountains. So he built the underground storage room. Not for himself, but for anyone who might need it. The notebook explained everything. How to rotate the food supplies. How to maintain the cabin. Even how to grow crops in the clearing behind the house. Samuel called the place a refuge. A place where people could survive when everything else went wrong. Lily closed the notebook slowly. "So, this cabin isn't just a cabin. No, it's a survival station." I nodded, and suddenly Walter's words from earlier made sense. "You might already have something better." He was right. We didn't just buy an old cabin. We bought a lifeline. Over the next few weeks, the cabin became something more than a shelter. We planted vegetables in the clearing behind the house, fixed the old well pump near the tree line, organized the storage room so we could track supplies properly, and slowly, the place started feeling like home. Not just a place to hide, but a place to build something. Then came the storm. It rolled in fast one night in early autumn. Heavy rain, strong winds, thunder that shook the valley. The dirt roads flooded within hours. Power lines went down across half the county, and people started getting stranded. That's when the first knock came on the door. A couple from the next valley had been driving through when the storm washed out the road. They were soaked and freezing. "We saw the cabin lights," the man said. "Can we wait out the storm here?" "Of course," Lily said. We brought them inside and lit the fireplace. Then another truck arrived. And another. Within an hour the cabin was full. Families, travelers, neighbors, everyone seeking shelter from the storm. And the underground storage room had exactly what they needed. Food, water, warm blankets. By morning the storm had passed. The valley was soaked. But nobody had been hurt. As people left the cabin that day, many of them stopped to shake our hands. One man looked back at the old log cabin, standing quietly in the clearing. "You know," he said, "this place probably saved a lot of lives last night." Lily looked at me and smiled. That evening we sat on the porch watching the sunset stretch across the valley. The forest glowed gold in the fading light. Lily leaned back against the railing. "You realize something?" "What?" "We started with $12. And now," she looked at the cabin behind us. The small garden in the clearing. The quiet smoke rising from the chimney. "Now we've got something that actually matters." I nodded. Because the $3 cabin didn't just change our lives. It gave us a place to start again.